I'm trying to find a common thread of what's going on, because when I woke up this morning, a lot of the headlines on the terminal were about economics and concerns about growth. There's been a lot of Fed speak. And then tech brings us back, baby. Google I.O., a developers conference, headlines, Alphabet's up 5%. What is it that you're paying attention to right now?
Well, I think you're making an interesting point, because really not just this morning, but the past few weeks, the past few months, maybe you could say the entire 2025 year so far has been focused on news out of Washington and kind of that macroeconomic and fiscal policy dynamic. And what we're seeing, at least for the moment, is a return back to the fundamentals, the individual story, and the AI narrative, which has been lost for a while as we've dealt with DeepSeek and as we've turned macroeconomics. So I think what we're seeing here is a move back to the individual companies a bit.
Right, and then it reminds me of all of the focus we had earlier in the year on Mag 7.
Right.
Perhaps actually more to the downside, but if you have a stock like Alphabet and it is up that much, just purely from a points perspective, it's giving us a little lift this morning.
That's
the moment in time. Yeah, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. All I was going to go on to say is, like, it was a moment in time where investors wanted to say, what is it you're going to do in AI? And they gave enough evidence, I think, over in Mountain View yesterday.
Well, I think that's absolutely the case. And I think what's also interesting is when we look back to earlier in the year, and really up until the present moment, a lot of the focus has been on the spend for AI and questions on whether that's reasonable. And at least with the most recent news, and I think this has been kind of filtering out over the course of the year, we're seeing a bit more of that use case. And that gives kind of a shinier tinge to what we can think about when it comes to AI. So it's shifting the narrative a bit. Now, whether this is long lasting, I think there's a lot more to see on that front. But it certainly is shifting the narrative to the use case rather than just the spend on AI on the CapEx front.
Liberation Day is it feels like it's in the rearview mirror a bit, but if there's one thing that's consistent about this administration and trade, it's that anything can happen. Is the market still braced for that? Is it checking over its shoulder for some uncertainty in the tech sector?
Well, this is what I'm wrestling with. I think Liberation Day, the seismic change in trade, where we don't really even fully know where it lands quite yet. It feels like, to your point, distant history, a blip on the radar, and markets have rallied really powerfully. That's at the broad market level, and that's also within technology. If we're looking at technology as a sector on a valuation basis relative to its history, it's back in those upper echelon of deciles where the valuations are really stretched. So that gives me some concern that there is a bit of complacency, or as we're thinking about the future, the range of outcomes, people are really focused on the positive and less focused on what could go wrong. That is the concern. But Ed, I think a really important point here is that the Mag 7 actually have looked cheaper. They've been harder hit over the course of 2025, and that's brought their valuations down. So maybe there's a bit more margin of safety in those mega cap tech names.
Right, that takes us to a broader conversation about valuations, right? That on any given day, you can forget that the technology sector is more than the Mag 7. Is there anywhere that you see opportunity or that you're super cautious on outside of that bucket of mega cap names?
I think I'd more characterize my view as cautious outside of the Mag 7. If you're breaking down the technology sector, going industry by industry, most of the industries look a bit expensive. And it's really that, and it's such a strange world to be talking about the Mag 7 as the valuation opportunity within tech, within the market. But that's kind of where our analysis is pointing us today.
Marta, I know that this isn't an entirely fair question, but okay. I'd ask you to have a crystal ball. What happens in the second half of this year for the technology sector?
Well, I think a big part of what we're going to see over the second half of the year is maybe not resolution, but additional clarity on what's happening on the tariff front for technology, what happens on the regulation front, what happens in terms of, as you were recently chatting about, the administration's focus on building out kind of the U.S. as an AI superpower. I think all of those different dynamics are going to have a role to play in terms of how technology performs over the course of 2025. And what we have to ask ourselves as investors is what of those outcomes are embedded in the price and where is there a margin of safety? And so that's the kind of chemistry that we have to do as we look at the different movers coming over the course of 2025.
Right. Marta, real quick, a big moment in the show earlier. Bitcoin at almost 109,000 US dollars per token. You interested there?
It's tough with this. It's real. I mean, what I really struggle with is where is the fair value here? And I think that's really hard to determine. So I think, yes, we're getting a lot of news on the regulation front that's going to charge Bitcoin, that's going to charge crypto. But I think what we have to ask ourselves is, can we predict what's coming next? And I think that's a bit harder question.